Ever crack open a beer, like, really enjoy it and wonder, like, how'd they get that flavor?
Right.
Well, today's deep dive, we're taking you inside the malt house. We're talking about malt house supervisors, those kind of behind the scenes folks who are essential to beer, whiskey, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, unsung heroes is a good way to put it. And we're lucky to have some great info from RoleCatcher.com for this deep dive. They have these in-depth career guides, and their Malt House Supervisor one is seriously helpful.
Yeah, RoleCatcher's a great resource. So before we get into like how to land the job and all that, let's talk about what a malt house supervisor actually does day to day. What's going on in the malt house?
Okay, so picture this. You walk into a working malt house, right? It's a sensory experience for sure. You've got the sound of machinery, maybe a bit of steam hissing, and then this incredible aroma of grain everywhere, but in different stages of, well, becoming malt. And overseeing it all is the malt house supervisor.
Okay, I'm getting a visual, but what are they doing in the middle of all that?
They're the ones managing the process, the steeping, the germination, the kilning, that whole transformation of raw grain into malt. It's their domain. It's like controlled decay, but with a very specific goal.
So it's not just knowing the steps, but knowing how to adjust them for different flavors, like a light beer versus a dark stout.
Exactly. A good malt house supervisor is like a conductor.
Mm-hmm.
They have to hit all the right notes with the process, making sure it lines up with what customers need, down to the detail. Temperature, humidity, timing, it all makes a difference.
Wow, I'm starting to realize how much responsibility they have, but gotta ask, what's the work environment really like?
It's definitely not an office job. I mean, it's cool, but demanding. We're talking about a production facility, so there's noise, probably some dust in the air, and the temperature, well, it fluctuates depending on what stage of the malting process you're in.
Rollcatcher even mentions the heat and humidity. You'd have to be pretty tough to handle that every day.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the hours. You got to be flexible because malting doesn't just stop. Weekends, maybe even some holidays, someone's got to be there to make sure things run right.
Okay, I gotta say, this is fascinating stuff, even for someone like me who, full disclosure, enjoys a good beer now and then, but I doesn't know all the ins and outs. But I'm already getting the sense that this malt house supervisor gig, it's more than just a job, it's a whole career path.
You hit the nail on the head. And the cool thing is, this industry is not going anywhere. If anything, it's growing like crazy.
So job security is a good thing, right? But how does someone actually move up in the ranks?
Well, Rollcatcher talks about this, actually. They mention how the craft beverage scene, with all the craft breweries and distilleries popping up, it's creating a need for, like, specialized malts. That means more opportunities.
Okay, so the demand is there, but what about the individual? How do you become the go-to malt master?
It's all about learning, keeping up with the trends, new technologies, maybe even specializing in a particular kind of malt. Like becoming the guru of, I don't know, smoked malts for those really intense beers.
I like the way you think. So it's not just about the technical stuff, but also like the artistry, the knowledge.
Absolutely. And having those certifications, those really show you're serious. Rollcatcher talks about the Cicerone certification. It's like the gold standard for beer knowledge.
So you could be a malt house supervisor who's also a certified beer expert.
Exactly. Talk
Yeah.
about impressive.
One thing that caught my eye in the Rollcatcher guide was this emphasis on active listening. It seems kind of out of place, for a job that seems so hands-on.
I get what you mean. But when you think about it, it makes sense. You've got a whole team to manage. Plus, you're dealing with customers who have really specific needs. Like, they want their malt to have this exact flavor profile for their beer. If you're not listening closely, things can go wrong fast.
That makes sense. You got to be able to translate what you're hearing into action on the malt house floor.
Right, it's like a two-way street. And speaking of skills, Rollcatcher also highlights coordination. That's huge in this job.
All right.
You're basically like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure all the different parts are working together in sync.
Okay, so let's say someone's listening to us right now and they're like, this is it. This is my dream job. What's the path look like? How do they go from like 0 to malt house supervisor?
Well, Rollcatcher lays it out pretty clearly. You usually start at the bottom, entry-level position, maybe a malt house operator.
Get your hands dirty, learn the ropes.
Exactly. That's where you build that foundation of knowledge. How to use the equipment, the ins and outs of each stage. And you got to prove yourself, Show that you're reliable, can handle the pace.
And from there, it's kind of a step-by-step thing.
Right. So you might move up to junior operator, then senior operator. Each level comes with more responsibility. Maybe you start training new hires or managing a whole section of the process.
So experience is key.
100%. That and a genuine passion for the craft.
All right, so you've put in the time, you've learned the craft, you're practically drooling over those specialty malts. Now for the real test, the interview.
Yeah, got to get past that hiring manager. But don't worry, RoleCatcher's got your back. They actually have a whole section on interview tips, even some sample questions.
Oh, like what? Give me the inside scoop.
Well, they mention one that's pretty common. How do you ensure quality standards are met? That's a big one, right? You got to be ready to talk about every step of the process and why it matters.
I bet. It's one thing to, like, memorize the steps, but they want to know you get it. You know, that you can troubleshoot if something goes sideways.
Totally. And speaking of troubleshooting, that's another thing RoleCatcher says to be prepared for. Like, how would you handle this specific problem, that kind of thing? Because let's be real, malt houses are busy places, things happen.
Makes sense. You can't predict everything.
Right. So they need someone who can think on their feet, you know, and not panic when things get a little heated, pun intended.
Nice one. So it's a combination of, like, technical know-how and a cool head under pressure.
Exactly. But hey, at the end of the day, if you've got a passion for this world, for the craft of making great beer and whiskey and everything in between, well, that comes through, you know.
Absolutely. I've got to say, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've covered so much, the process, the skills, the career path, even how to nail that interview.
It's been fun. And who knows, maybe we've inspired some future Malt House supervisors out there.
Hey, you never know. So to all our listeners, if you're looking for a career that's both challenging and rewarding, where you can really get your hands dirty and be a part of something special, well, maybe the Malt House is calling your name. That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, cheers.